Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everyday English Channel with Tom and Kate. We're really happy to have you with us today.
Yes, thanks for joining us again. It's always a good moment to sit down, relax, and have a natural conversation together. Before we start, if you enjoy these kinds of calm and practical English conversations, you can subscribe to the channel like the video, or share this episode with someone who is learning English. It really helps us, and we really appreciate it.
So, today we're going to talk about something very common in everyday life, making plans with someone. And it's interesting because it sounds simple, but when you really listen to how people do it, there are a lot of small steps in the conversation.
Yes, and it's something we all do without thinking. But when you look at it more closely, there is actually a very natural structure. You don't just say, "Let's meet." You usually start by checking if the other person is available. In my case, I tend to be quite direct. I usually say something like, "Are you free this weekend?" or "Are you free on Saturday?" I like to be specific because it helps move the conversation forward quickly.
That sounds very organized, which is not surprising. I approach it a bit differently. I'm usually less direct at the beginning. Instead of asking a yes or no question, I might say, "What are you doing this weekend?" Or, "Do you have anything planned?" That way, the other person has more space to explain their situation. It feels more open, less structured.
That's interesting because both approaches work, but they create a slightly different conversation. With a direct question like, "Are you free on Saturday?" you get a clear answer quickly. But with a more open question like yours, the conversation can develop more naturally.
Yes. And once that first question is asked, the answer can go in several directions. The person might say they're completely free, or they already have plans, or they're not sure yet. That uncertainty is actually very common in real life.
And that's where the conversation becomes flexible. If the person is available, you move naturally to the next step, which is making a suggestion. Here again, the language is very simple. You don't need complex sentences. You can say things like, "Do you want to grab a coffee?" or "Do you want to go out for dinner?" I use "do you want to" quite often because it's clear and natural.
I use that too, but I also like using slightly softer expressions. For instance, "How about" works very well. You can say, "How about going to the cinema?" or "How about meeting on Sunday?" It sounds less direct, more like you're offering an idea rather than making a decision.
That's true. Another option I often use is "we could." It gives the impression that you're exploring possibilities together. You might say, "We could go for a walk," or "We could try that new restaurant." It feels more relaxed, less fixed.
Yes, and that tone is important. Making plans is not just about the idea itself, it's also about how you present it.
And then comes the response, which is usually much shorter than people expect. That's something learners don't always realize. People don't give long answers here. They say things like, "Yeah, that sounds good," or "That works for me."
Or sometimes the answer is not a clear yes or no. Someone might say, "I'm not sure," or "maybe," or "I already have something on Saturday." That's very common because people don't always know their schedule perfectly.
And when that happens, the conversation doesn't stop. It adjusts. Instead of saying just no, people often propose an alternative. They might say, "I can't on Saturday, but I'm free on Sunday." That keeps the interaction positive and makes it easier to continue.
Yes, and that's a key part of real conversations. You don't block the plan, you adapt it.
After that, you usually move to confirming the details. This part is simple but very important. You need to agree on the time and the place. So you hear questions like, "What time works for you?" or "Where should we meet?"
And again, the answers stay very simple. People say, around 6 is fine, or let's meet at the cafe, or I'll text you the address.
No complicated structures, just clear communication.
And when you look at the whole process, something becomes clear. Making plans in English follows a very natural flow. You check availability, you suggest something, you adjust if needed, and then you confirm.
Yes, and once you understand that flow, everything becomes much easier. You don't need to think too much about what to say. You just follow the conversation step by step.
What I find interesting with making plans is that even when something sounds simple at the beginning, it rarely stays that simple. There's almost always a moment where something changes or needs to be adjusted. You might agree on a day quickly, but then later one person realizes they're not completely available, or something else comes up. In that situation, the way you respond is very important. In real conversations, people don't usually cancel abruptly. They tend to explain briefly and then suggest an alternative. So instead of just saying, "I can't," they say something like, "Hey, I just checked, and I'm actually busy on Saturday. Would Sunday work instead?" It keeps the conversation smooth and cooperative.
Yes, and I recognize myself in that situation quite a lot. I sometimes say yes too quickly because I like the idea in the moment, and then later I realize I already had something planned. So I need to adjust, and I try to do it in a way that doesn't break the flow of the conversation. I might say, "I thought I was free, but I'm not anymore. Could we do it another day?" It feels more natural than just canceling, and it also shows that I still want to meet, just not at that time.
Another situation that happens very often is when you're not completely sure from the beginning. Instead of giving a clear yes or no, people often keep things open. They say things like, "I'm not sure yet," or "I might be free, I need to check." That kind of answer is very common because in real life, people don't always know their schedule perfectly. It gives them time to confirm later without closing the conversation.
Yes, and that's something I do a lot. I don't always like deciding immediately. I prefer keeping options open and then confirming later when I have a clearer idea of my plans. And when I come back with a final answer, I usually keep it simple. I say something like, "I'm free now, we can do it," or "Sorry, I won't be able to make it." That expression, "I won't be able to make it," is actually very useful. It sounds natural, polite, and it fits many situations.
Another pattern that appears all the time is how plans become more precise step by step. At the beginning, everything is quite general. You might say, "Let's meet this weekend," which is very open. Then, as the conversation continues, it becomes more specific. You move to, "Let's meet on Saturday," then, "Let's meet at 6," and finally something like, "Let's meet at the cafe near the station." So instead of deciding everything at once, the plan evolves gradually.
Yes, and that's where personality plays a role. If both people are flexible, like me, the conversation can stay open for quite a long time. You say things like, "I'm free most of the weekend," or "We can decide later," and nothing is fixed immediately. Sometimes that's nice because it feels relaxed, but sometimes it also means the plan takes longer to actually happen.
That's where I tend to be a bit different. I prefer deciding earlier because it removes uncertainty. I might say something like, let's fix a time now, or let's decide so we don't forget. It's not about being strict, but about making things clear. Once the plan is fixed, you don't need to think about it anymore.
Yes, and I think most people recognize themselves in one of these two styles. Some prefer flexibility, others prefer structure. But what's interesting is that the language stays simple in both cases.
Another very common moment in making plans is confirming everything again, especially on the same day. It's very typical to send a short message like, "Are we still on for tonight?" or "Are we still meeting at 6?" These questions are short, but very important. They help avoid confusion, especially if the plan was made a few days earlier.
And the answers are just as simple. People say things like, "Yeah, still good," or "Yes, see you later," or sometimes, "Can we move it to 7?" if something changes. What I find interesting is that even when plans change at the last minute, people usually stay relaxed about it.
Yes, they adapt. They say things like, "No problem," or "That's fine," or "We can do it another time." It keeps the conversation light and avoids unnecessary tension.
And I think that's really the key idea here. Making plans in English is not about having everything perfect from the beginning. It's about adapting, adjusting, and keeping the interaction comfortable.
Exactly. The structure is simple. The language is simple, but the flexibility is what makes it feel natural.
Actually, this is a good moment to try something practical. Instead of just talking about making plans, why don't we make one right now? Let's say we want to meet this weekend. I'll start the way I usually do. I'd probably say something like, "Are you free on Saturday afternoon?" I like being precise from the beginning because it helps move things forward without too much back and forth.
That already feels very you. It's clear, direct, and efficient. If I answer honestly, I'd probably say something like, "I'm not completely sure yet. I think I'm free, but I might have something in the morning." That's usually how my plans look at the beginning, not fully decided. And instead of stopping there, I'd probably keep it open by adding something like, "What did you have in mind?" That way, I don't commit immediately, but I stay in the conversation.
That makes sense. So in that situation, I would take your answer and move to a suggestion, but still keep it simple. I might say, "We could meet for coffee, or maybe go for a walk if the weather is nice." I prefer offering one or two options, not too many, because it makes the decision easier.
I like that approach. It gives direction without being too rigid. From my side, I would react to one of the options instead of analyzing everything. I might say, "A walk sounds nice," especially if I'm not fully sure about my schedule yet. At that point, I'm not confirming everything. I'm just showing preference. That's something I do a lot. I move step by step instead of deciding everything at once.
And that's where I usually try to bring a bit more structure into the plan. If you say a walk sounds good, I would naturally move to the next step and ask something like, "What time would work for you?" That question helps turn the idea into something more concrete.
Yes, and this is where I often hesitate a bit, because I don't always like fixing a precise time too early. I might say something like, "Maybe sometime in the afternoon," which is still quite vague.
And that's where I would probably respond by narrowing it down. Not in a strict way, but just to make it clearer. I might say, "Would around 3 work?" It's still flexible, but it gives a reference point.
That works well, actually. It's easier to react to a suggestion than to create one. So I would probably say, "Yeah, around 3 sounds fine." At that moment, the plan starts to feel more real, even if it's still simple.
Exactly. And once we have the time, the next step is usually the place. I might suggest something like, let's meet at the park near the city center. Again, I try to keep it clear and easy to understand.
And from my side, I would probably accept or slightly adjust. If it works, I'd say, yeah, that's perfect. If not, I might say, could we meet closer to the station? Depending on what's easier for me.
That kind of small adjustment is very common. People rarely accept everything exactly as it is. They adapt a little.
Yes, and that's what makes the conversation feel natural. It's not a fixed script, it's a collaboration.
And once the main elements are decided, the day, the time, and the place, the conversation usually becomes very short again.
Yes, at that point, people just confirm. Something like, all right, see you on Saturday at 3, or perfect, see you there.
And that's it. The plan is made.
What I like about this process is that everything stays simple. We didn't use complicated sentences, but we still managed to organize something clearly.
Yes, and it shows that making plans in English is not about knowing advanced vocabulary. It's about following a natural sequence and using a few key expressions at the right moment.
And also being flexible when needed.
Exactly. Because in real life, things rarely go exactly as planned.
You know, what we just described sounds quite smooth, but in real life, things don't always go exactly as planned. Even when everything is clear, something can change at the last minute. And I think that's actually one of the most interesting parts of making plans, because it's where communication really matters. If I need to change something, I try to keep it simple and direct, but also cooperative. I wouldn't just say, I can't. I'd say something like, hey, something came up, can we move our plan to later today? That way, I'm not just canceling, I'm also offering a solution.
Yes, and that makes a big difference. When you add that second part, proposing another option, the conversation stays open. I do something similar, although sometimes I hesitate a bit before sending the message, especially if it's last minute. But I've realized that keeping it simple works best. I might say, sorry, I won't be able to make it this afternoon. Can we try tomorrow? It's honest, it's clear, and it shows that I still want to meet, just not at that time.
And most of the time, the reaction is very relaxed. People usually respond with something like, no problem, or that's fine, or we'll do it another time. That's something important to understand. Conversations around plans are generally flexible, not rigid.
Yes, and even when the plan doesn't change completely, there is often a moment of uncertainty. You agree on something, but it's not 100% fixed yet. In those situations, people don't always confirm in a strong way. They use softer expressions like, so maybe around 3, or let's say 3 for now. That kind of phrasing keeps things open while still moving forward.
And then, as the time gets closer, the communication becomes more precise. Instead of leaving things open, people usually confirm again with a short message, something like, are we still on for tonight? Or just checking for later. These short confirmations are very common and very useful because they avoid misunderstandings.
Another situation that happens all the time is being late. It's very common, and again, the language stays simple. If I know I'm going to be late, I just send a quick message like, I'm running a bit late. I'll be there in 10 minutes. It's clear, direct, and it immediately solves the situation.
I do the same, but sometimes in a more relaxed way. I might say, I'm on my way, just a bit late, without giving an exact time. And that still works, because the important thing is to inform the other person. It shows respect for the plan, even if it's not perfectly followed.
And I think that's really the key idea behind all of this. Making plans is not only about organizing something step by step, it's also about maintaining a good interaction from beginning to end. From the first question to the suggestion to the confirmation, and even when things change, the goal is to keep the conversation smooth and comfortable.
Yes, and when you look at all these situations together, something becomes very clear. The language used is always simple. You don't need complex sentences or advanced vocabulary. You need clear questions, simple suggestions, and natural reactions.
And once you understand that, everything becomes much easier. You're not trying to build perfect sentences. You're just following a natural flow that you already know in your own language.
Exactly. You already know how to make plans. In English, you're just learning how to express the same ideas with simple, practical phrases.
And the more you use them, the more natural it becomes.
Before we finish, thank you very much for spending this time with us today.
We hope this conversation helps you feel more comfortable making plans in English in real-life situations.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the channel or share it with someone who is learning English.
It really helps us grow, and we truly appreciate your support.
Join us in the next episode for another calm and practical English conversation.
Thanks again for listening.
And remember, keep speaking English every day.